Can you slide that chair in so they can get through?
And I invite us to stand. We're going to begin by singing Summoned by the God Who Made Us.
Here, you want to get rid of it?
No, I think we're good for now. Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Oh, no problem.
Summoned by the God who made us, rich in our diversity, gathered in the name of Jesus, Richert still in unity. Let us bring our gifts that differ, and in splendid varied ways, sing a new into being, one in faith and love and praise. Radiant risen from the water, robed in holiness and light, every person in God's image, every person God's delight. Let us bring our gifts that differ, and in splendid varied ways, sing a new church into being, one in faith and love and praise. Trust the goodness of creation, trust the Spirit strong within. Dare to dream the vision promised, sprung from seed of blood and skin. Let us bring our gifts that differ, and in splendid varied ways, sing a new church into being, one in faith and love and praise. Bring the hopes of every nation, bring the art of every race. Weave a song of peace and justice, let it sound through time and space. Let us bring our gifts that differ, and in splendid varied ways, sing a new church into being, one in faith and love and praise. Draw together at one table, all humanity family. Shape a circle ever wider, and a people ever free. Let us bring our gifts that differ, and in splendid varied ways, sing a new church into being, one in faith and love and praise.
Negon Sinclair, who is an Indigenous scholar and has a column in the Winnipeg Free Press, suggests that land acknowledgement is not quite the right word for this, because it's not only about acknowledging the land, but acknowledging the relationships of the people who live on the land. And in that spirit, may these words prepare us for listening and growing in relationship with one another and with our Creator. We gather here as human beings, wonderful and yet imperfect, made by our Creator God, each unique, and yet made for community and relationship. 150 years ago, there was a new opportunity for relationships when Mennonite people came to live here in this land. As Mennonites, we were not the first people to live here. Cree, Anishinaabe, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people called this place home. Communities held dances and ceremonies in fields nearby. Waterways like the Buffalo Channel were important landmarks. Hills were a meeting place for Indigenous people. For many of us gathered here today, our ancestors left Russia because of threats to our faith and our way of life. And we found a home here. And this land has been good and productive for us. And we have a lot to be grateful for. But in these last 150 years, we have not been faithful to the opportunity of relationship, or been faithful to the Treaty 1, the agreement in which Indigenous nations granted the honor and the right for us to abide here. And we acknowledge these wrongs and we repent. And we have begun the journey of seeking truth and reconciliation. And we are becoming aware now of a fuller story of this land that we call home. Aware that the land does not belong to us, that we are guests here. Aware that when we as Mennonites arrived, the land was not empty. We are aware that our settling here meant that others were removed or confined. And we are aware that these injustices continue to affect our present realities. We are aware of the racism in our past and even in our present in its individual and systemic forms. And so in light of the past, it is with gratitude that we gather here today, because we have an opportunity to take a step toward renewing our relationship with host peoples. And we accept our responsibility to listen and to learn, to heal and restore, and to build relationships and to seek peace in this land that we share. As an invitation to praise, I share some words of Scripture from a new translation of the New Testament called the First Nations Version, an indigenous translation of the New Testament. And this new translation of the Bible is in the tradition of native storytellers, but also seeks to be faithful to the original languages of the Bible. And I share these words from Philippians, the Christ hymn. And in the indigenous New Testament, the name of Jesus is holds closely to its original Hebrew meaning. So the name of Jesus is Creator Sets Free. Think about yourselves in the same way Creator sets free. The chosen one thought about himself. Even though Creator sets free has always been the same as the Great Spirit and shared everything equally with him, he did not think of holding on to this in a selfish way. Instead, he emptied himself, became nothing, and gave up all he had. Then, having been born as a human being, he took on himself the lowly form of a servant. As a true human being, he lowered himself even more by following the guidance of the Great Spirit, even though death was waiting for him at the end of the trail. Death on a tree pole, the cross. Because Creator sets free did this, the Great Spirit gave him an honored place above all others and bestowed on him a name greater than all other names, so that all who live in the spirit world above, on the earth below, and underneath the earth will bow their knee to Creator Sets Free in honor of his name. And then everyone in their native language will shout out loud that Creator Sets Free, the chosen one, is Grand Chief over all the earth. And this will bring honor and praise to our Father, the Great Spirit. There are some prayer concerns in our community to share today. We need to be in prayer for our sisters and brothers, Miriam and Pablo and Martin and Valentina, who experienced a significant loss at the death of Miriam's father this week in Ecuador. And the grief is great, especially when one cannot be together with family. So we will pray for you. Art Dick is in the hospital, in the Altona hospital. And I also share the sudden death of a brother-in-law to Wayne and Marianne Lepke. Can you remind me the name? Hans Miller. And we did celebrate it last Sunday, but the bulletin reminds us also of the engagement of Gavin and Linnea, and so we rejoice at that too. Let us pray. Our gracious God and Heavenly Father, we gather this day to listen and to learn and to walk the path that you have set for us. You know the concerns of our community, and we lift them up to your care. We pray for Art Dick. For Miriam, Pablo, Martin, and Valentina, and their family. For Wayne and Marianne, and the family of Hans. and we celebrate the engagement of Gavin and Linnea and the joy and celebration this brings to many. God, our prayer for today. God, be in our head and in our understanding. God, be in our eyes and in our seeing. God, be in our mouth and in our speaking. God, be in our heart and in our loving. God, be in our steps and in our walking. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. And now we're going to invite the children to come forward for a story. And we're going to sing as the kids come forward. And kids, you can come and do the actions and sing along. We're going to sing Be a Sower.
Be a sower, plant a seed, let it grow into a tree. Give it water, watch it grow, and give it the love that it needs. Be humble and gentle and always be looking for peace. 1, 2, God makes the sun.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to sit up here so you can all see me. I can see all of you. I have a question for you as we begin here. Right? Am I good? Good. Why do we have 2 eyes? I don't know. Okay. 1 mouth, right? 1 nose, but then suddenly 2 eyes. What? Right. Oh. Right. So you can see a little bit more. Should we? I love that. I think that's a great point. Should we give it a little test I think maybe we'll probably be a little careful, but let's stand up and let's cover one eye. All right, everyone stand up, cover an eye, and let's give a little walk around, a little careful walk around. All right, cover one eye. How's this feeling? Keep that eye closed. Oh boy. Okay. See if you can find your way. Don't take off your hand until you're sitting again. See if you can sit all the way down. Oh boy. I can't. Okay. Oh. Boy, it's nice to use both eyes, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What did you notice? What was harder? I'll do this so that you can hear.
It was harder to notice things that were on the, like, this side, because, like, he covered that side, yeah.
Okay, what else was harder? Anyone else have?
It was harder to not bump into people.
So, I think that's a great point, and the reason it's harder not to bonk into people is because we can't see as much, but also there's something called depth perception, which allows us to tell how far away things are. And when we have two eyes, it gives us depth perception, which means I can tell that Maida is that far away from me, but when I have one eye closed, it's kind of harder to tell just how far. Am I pinching her? Not quite. So you know, it's harder to tell how far away things are. I'm going to read a bit of a book, not the whole thing, but some of this book talks about seeing with both eyes. It's a book called Walking Together, and it's by Elder Albert Marshall and Louise Zimani. And what do you see on the cover here? A turtle, and what's happening on the turtle's back?
People on shell.
People are on the shell, exactly. So people are walking on the shell. Why do you think, does anyone know why there would be people walking on turtle shell?
Because we're on Turtle Island.
Oh, wow. That was exactly it. Perfect. So in the First Nations community, often North America was given the name, before it had the name of North America, it had the name of Turtle Island. So here they are walking together on the back of a turtle, walking together, and that's what this book is about. All right, so now I'm going to read you a few pages from this book. And you can look at the beautiful pictures. When we walk together in a good way, we learn to see the world through two eyes. We'll have to think about what that means. When we walk together, we see the world through two eyes. When we walk together in a good way, things are revealed. Things like the songs of the birds in spring, maybe the frogs going to sleep in the winter under the ice. It would be cold, right? When we walk together in a good way on Turtle Island, oh, there you go, we learn we're all connected. We are never alone. We need each other. Mawikwayak, which means together we are strong. Together we're strong. So we're all connected. When we walk together in a good way, we learn about the gifts and the stories of our family, of the lands, and of the waters, and those who were here before us, and those who will be here after us. So when we walk together, we learn all about each other and about ourselves. Can you sit down so everyone can see? When we walk together in a good way, we learn the languages of the land. Languages of the land. In the Bible, there's a couple verses in the Bible in Job that say, ask the animals and they will teach you. The birds of the air will tell you. Ask the plants and the trees and they will teach you, and the fish will instruct you. Isn't that funny, thinking about creation as being our teacher? Well, that's exactly what this is saying too. When we walk together in a good way, we learn the languages of the land. So walking together isn't just walking together with other people, it's walking together with creation. And when we walk together in a good way, we give back gifts by taking care of our family. We leave things where they are. In this picture, what are they leaving where it is? They're leaving the nest where it is, right? And the baby birds in there. We take care of creation by enjoying where it is. We take... Oh, first I'm going to ask, what do you think is happening in this photo? Anyone know? Yeah, Hazel.
They're getting syrup from maple trees like we did a few years ago.
You've done that before? You're right. Man, you guys are smart. They're getting syrup from maple trees. Exactly. And this says, we take only if there is enough. We ask before we take, and we listen for the answer. We share. We sing the Mother Earth song. We say thank you, miigwech, which means thank you. Got 2 more pages for you. You're doing so well. When we walk together in a good way, we remember mawikweak, which means together we are strong. And when we take care of the land and the water take care of us. When we walk together in a good way, we learn to know the world through 2 eyes. What do you notice about those eyes in this picture? They're different colors. That's right, we've got a blue eye and a brown eye. Different peoples walking together. Okay. So, when we walk together with other people, when we work with others, it says we see the world through 2 eyes, which means when we don't work with others and when we don't listen to creation or to the stories of other peoples, it means we're walking around in this world like we had one eye closed. And how did that feel? Remember how that felt? Oh, it felt so good to sit down and open your eye again. You could see everything, right? Yeah, exactly. So when we don't see everything, we're missing important parts of our world. We're not getting the full image of creation when we don't work with others or allow others to speak. So this morning, there's a man here named David Scott, who is a traditional knowledge keeper, and he's here, and part of the reason he's here is because our church is on a journey. And did you know we're on a journey of learning? Because learning doesn't stop when you become an adult. In fact, you still have lots to learn. And so we are learning alongside you, we adults, and we and you are learning about how to walk together with our brothers and sisters who are First Nations. And when we walk together, like this book says, when we walk together, we are stronger. So today is about wanting to learn how to see the world with 2 eyes. So you can remember that. Thank you for being so good at listening. There's going to be some, there's some coloring sheets that... There's some coloring sheets there that you can come pick out, and if anyone didn't come up, they can come back and get some.
I first heard about David Scott when I read The Secret Treaty, and I was very intrigued because it was a story of hope and possibility for relationships. And I thought it would be wonderful if we could have David Scott come to our church. But it seemed that was maybe aiming a little bit too high. But when I called David, he accepted the invitation right away. And David is a traditional Ojibwe knowledge keeper. He's an environmental expert. He's an expert on treaties and indigenous rights, and I believe speaks a couple different languages. His native Ojibwe and Cree, I believe, as well, and English too. And it is a tremendous honor that David has granted us space in his very busy speaking schedule. So come on up, David, and share with us.
Thank you, Mark. It is Mark. Yeah, okay. I have names. Thank you. I guess the first thing I should do is apologize for missing my last appointment with you. I'm always apologizing to doctors because I always miss those appointments as well. Yeah, I ended up in hospital at Boundary Trail the last time I was supposed to be here, so I apologize to them. But I am glad to be here. Very, very glad to be here. So thank you for that invitation, Mark. I really appreciate it. I enjoy coming out and speaking to different types of communities that I go to. And this area has been especially important for me because of the relationships that I have created and the community of Morden. I have lots of good friends there that have helped me along my journey on this road of truth and reconciliation. I'm honored today to speak on a large part of Canadian history that has been missing from the minds of those who have come to this land. Thank you for those songs and to the 6 ladies I sat with there this morning when I had breakfast. So thank you for, where's Hilda? Hilda, oh there she is right there, yeah, and her little lesson for me and answering my questions very kindly. One of the words in our language that we use to identify German-speaking people is Mishidun. Mishidun means people with beards or bearded people. We misinterpreted that initially and called the Mennonites the bearded people. We now know that those are the Hutterites. So my apologies for that. But there are other words that we use to describe the language sound, and I want to make sure that you understand. It's the sounds that we heard, not the words. It's the way the words are drawn out. That's how we differentiate people in my culture. So the second word that we used is Gashashavidisadewad, the barefooted people, which we now know are Ukrainian people back in those days. Then we used the word Gagidimagizyot, which is the persecuted people, which we now know are the Mennonite people. I sat in a conference at the University of Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago on the history of Mennonite people, and I sat with a lot of historians, and I talked about this treaty. But I think it's important that we understand why it was a secret treaty. Okay, the question is always asked, right? Why was it secret? Well, I'll explain to you why it was a secret. Kichinika, my great-grandfather, sat on a hill south of the city of Morden, and he said these words, "They have taken our lands that we have tried to save for our children and for the children yet unborn. We will not be able to survive. We are weak, we are sick, we have no land. The promises that were made to us were not honest. There is no honor in the words of the light-skinned people. Our journey with them has come to an end." This would have been said around the 1880s. And Kichinika, the land that we have here in Altona and out in the open prairie, that was his territory. They were called the grass people, Mashkusik. In our societies, in our culture, there's many different little societies. Some of them very large. And Kichinika was the army guy. He was in charge of the army. And they were grass people. They were the ones that would have been looking after this area when they met the people that came here. So let me start My name is David Scott. I was born in 1960. I was born a citizen of Canada, but a person under the Indian Act. In the Indian Act, the definition of a person is read like this: a person is anyone other than an Indian. We were not people in Canadian or British common law of that day. So that's the first thing that we need to understand when we talk about these treaties. I was raised on the Swan Lake Indian Reserve. I was raised as a traditional person by my grandparents and my parents, and by the many old people of my community. They were all traditional people. My paternal grandfather, Major Kibinance, lived in the days of Wazawigwan, Chief Yellowquill. Chief Yellowquill was the chief that signed Treaty 1 on behalf of our people at Swan Lake. The old people, Major Kibinance died in the house that I was raised in. He was 108 years old when he passed away at my house. The old people of my community were all traditional people. They lived their entire lives in my community. They lived off the land as much as they could or were allowed to. Their teachings from their life experiences and the teachings of their ancestors. I benefited from their knowledge and their teachings. They taught me by the same method used for centuries, handing stories down one generation to the next. My language, my culture, my spirituality is all that I am and who I have chosen to be. I do not seek, nor would I accept the validation from any Canadian institution for the things I know about who I am as an Ojibwe person. I don't have letters attached to my name, nor should there be. I live who I am, I speak my language fluently, I live my culture and practice my traditions and believe in the spirituality of my ancestors. The first law of the Ojibwe people is to look at people as human beings first. No matter who you pray to, no matter the color of your skin, that was who we were. Colonialism has deep and stubborn roots. I have struggled with this concept all of my working life, to bring the people of this land from colonialistic paternalism to a more balanced form of understanding one another. There is a need now more than ever in this time of truth and reconciliation for this to happen, for our peoples to work together and developing understanding, trust, and respect. In the absence of understanding, trust, and respect, we will continue to turn to our assumptions of one another, and it is these assumptions that gives life to hatred. We have expressed our willingness to explore whatever is necessary to keep us on a proactive path of reconciling our differences. If we are willing to listen and discuss with open minds the issues that keeps us apart, no matter how difficult, we can push back the forces of hatred. Jonathan Dyck, Will Braun, and myself took that first step by writing a story that I have carried all of my life. That was told to me by my grandparents. The story of this treaty that was made by my great-grandfather, Kichinika, and the people he met on the open prairie below what we would call the Buffalo Jump on the northern escarpment. So the secret treaty has finally gotten our story out there. I've been trying to write a book for the last 15 years about the history of our people and what is missing in Canadian history about who we are. The secret treaty, the title tells a lot about the breakdown of our relationship. Why was it a secret treaty? Why was it not widely known in your communities? Why was it hidden? Why can we not take the steps to repair our relationship as the treaty intended. The history of our relationship has been deliberately hidden in Western society that has become known as Canada. Throughout my discussions with Western society, I keep getting asked these two questions. How do we coexist? And how can we coexist when one side is so destructive? As an Ojibwe person, I have tried to answer this question. The institutions of this country are set up in favor of Western society and culture. The rules that have prevented our people from being heard, these rules have prevented our people from being heard. I have been taught to respect all things that live on this earth and to live in harmony with nature. My elders and I are aware of this inherent conflict between the two ways of life. To quote one of the old people of my reserve, in order not to hear us, they hide behind these rules. In order not to hear us, shame was put upon all newcomers who came to this land, and it was shameful for them to speak to us. On one of the days of negotiations of Treaty 1, my great-grandfather Kichinika rose and said these words, "Your God has no place amongst my people." In turn, Chief Yellowquill then rose and said this, "We ask that you do not repeat the mistakes of the past. Do not assume that our willingness to accommodate you is a sign of weakness. We are the same kind-hearted people you met when you walked onto our mother. We will do right by you because we respect life." The laws and history of this country and the belief systems that came to our shores have prevented our peoples from living together in harmony. They have prevented us from looking at one another as human beings and speak to one another's communities directly. Despite this history, it is my hope that our peoples, all of our peoples, take seriously the opportunity to resolve the difficulties we face. One of the key issues is the spirit and intent of treaty, alongside its results. Sharing the land and its abundance with those that came here with nothing but the clothes on their backs and in need of our assistance to exist is a responsibility our people took upon themselves. It was natural for us to take care of others, as this is part of our first law. To this day, our names for places throughout this land and this area have been taken away. Our heritage erased from these locations, and our culture outlawed and marginalized. We have been forced onto reserves to live according to the Indian Act, a document created by, enforced by the Canadian government. This was not the spirit and intent of treaty making according to the practices of the Ojibwe people. But this is what happened regardless. Much has been lost in the process of attempting to assimilate and annihilate Ojibwe culture. The shame put upon white society for associating with indigenous peoples, Christians in particular, by the governments of the time was an attempt to kill the treaties happening on the ground. Settlers at the time frequently came into contact with Ojibwe people of Manitoba, with treaties being made to facilitate aid and knowledge sharing between our peoples. Many such treaties were created between the Ojibwe and the people groups like the Mennonites and the Ukrainians, with the assumption of reciprocal aid in times of need. Interaction by our communities was frequent despite the intention of trying to prevent us from being together. Treaties like this were against Canadian law. The secret treaty is what I'm talking about now. It was against Canadian law. under Section 9124 of the British North America Act. It was the federal Crown's responsibility to deal directly with Indians. No white man could do that. You were not allowed to speak with us. You could not interact with us. You couldn't buy a chicken off of me. You couldn't do that. That was the federal Crown's responsibility. And under Section 30 of the Indian Act, it's a trespass law. And in that law, it says that no white man is to walk on Indian land. You're not allowed. In my reserve, the Indian agent had a great big white house in the middle of the reserve. And in order for that white man to get to that house, we had to surrender land for a road. And yet once he got there, he could go anywhere he wanted. And he did. He controlled everything on the reserve and controlled everything that Indians did. Most of those people, those people that came into the reserve were old British white men. Very Christian. I think they were probably Anglican or Church of England, I think is what they were called. And they were usually drunkards. They drank a lot. I know the ones at our reserve, they were always drunk. And when they would teach kids in the school, he would fall asleep, and they would put wood ticks on his head while he was sleeping. They had these little games that they played with those people. They called our reserve that troublesome band of Indians because we wouldn't follow the rules they set out for us. We would sneak off the reserve, go hunting, do whatever we wanted. Remember, those are old British drunk white men that came on the reserve. So while they were getting drunk, we would do whatever we wanted, right? Indian agents had a lot of power on Indian reserves, lots of power. They could interpret law, they could make policy and enforce it. Their job was to confine Indians to Indian reserves. The pass and permit system was brought in place where you couldn't leave the reserve without that piece of paper on your person. You had to have that or you went to jail, sometimes up to 5 days. And usually the time frames say, well, I needed to go to Long Plains to visit a relative that's sick or something like that. On horseback, it would probably take about 10 hours because you didn't want to be mean to the horses. And there was a place at the Assiniboine River where you crossed. That's where you would say, we call that No Kwezi Beach, or where we have lunch breaks, is what that means. So they would constrict the time so that you couldn't really make it to those places that you wanted to go on those pass systems. It was entirely up to the Indian agent what they put on those pieces of paper. You couldn't leave the reserve. Chief and councils were under the control of the Indian agent. If you didn't do what the Indian agent said, you got removed by a stroke of a pen. I wish they do that sometimes now, but they don't. There were many treaties like this one that we're talking about today. There were many of them, and there's many more that have to come out and tell these stories. We did start off on the right foot when we met you out on the prairie. We did have an intention. But sadly, that treaty was broken. It was broken by government policy and Christian beliefs. Once the Mennonite community started getting established, they didn't want to have anything to do with us. And my work for the last 15 or so years was working with the Mennonite community specifically to look at this kind of treaty, to look at what we could have done, to look at the relationship we could have had. Interaction between communities was frequent, but the words they used to describe us came right out of laws and because of Christian beliefs. We were called pagans, savages, what else did they call us? Devil worshippers. And everybody thought we needed civilizing. That was the intent of Canada's Indian policies. As time went on, treaties fell apart because of government push to enforce the laws of this country. And that was to keep you away from us and us away from you. It was against the law for us to interact in Canadian history. Lots of laws that came in. There was a bunch of laws that came in the 1850s. They became known altogether as the Indian Act that we see today. But there were laws like an act for the gradual civilization of the Indian, an act to rid the problem in 25 years of the Indian problem in 25 years, Detribalization Act. There's a lot of those laws that came into being and now were put into what we now live with today, which is the Indian Act. The Indian Act was also an act to make sure that women had no role in our society. Ojibwe society is matriarchal. It's not paternal, it's not male-dominated like it is today. I remember when I was at the constitutional talks in the 80s, in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was our very male chiefs that ensured that the laws, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms would not be implemented on Indian reserves because they didn't want women to take power back. They didn't want to change that because of the power that men had. And it was our own people that did that. So it wasn't until September 12 of 2012 that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms were fully implemented on Indian reserves. 2012. That's when that full charter was implemented on Indian reserves. We do have a lot of people in our reserve that are just as racist, just as misogynistic, just as hateful as any other society has. The work that I've been doing lately is to try and decolonize my own people, because that's all they know. And I'm trying to take the Indian Act out of the Indians at Swan Lake, because that's all they know. Our chiefs and councils are forced to apply the Indian Act on their own people. And they don't even know that that's what they're doing. Colonialism has deep and stubborn roots. And it's still happening today, and it's happening with our people as well. The languages that we once knew are not used in our community anymore. I'm the last one in Swan Lake Reserve that knows the old Ojibwe language. My older brother and my older sister are speakers, but they speak Soto. Soto is a Christian dialect of the Ojibwe people, of the Ojibwe language. I'll give you an example of how tricky it is. Soto is the same words that we use in Ojibwe. Same thing, but the meaning is different. You take the word tongue. In Soto you say ndenanil. In Ojibwe, when you say ndenanil, it doesn't mean this thing in your mouth. Ndenanil, to speak from the heart. That's what that means. De is heart, anil is to speak from the heart. The language is very, very key for our own people to understand these kinds of treaties that we're talking about today. The interpretation of this treaty is one of our people. The stories are all in the old Ojibwe language. We were lucky that in our reserve our chief recognized the importance and tried to secure the old stories of our people. So we started collecting those stories in 1971. by a lady named Marie Gordon. She was a fluent speaker, and we had lots of speakers back then. I remember those old people and the stories they told. So we started collecting those things. I took over that file in 1976. I started working in my reserve when I was 16 years old. The old people, Hilda asked me a question earlier. How did I get this job? The old people of my reserve set me on this path of learning histories. It was them that said, no, not you. You're going to learn these histories. We're going to be your teachers. I remember when I talked to the chief of the day, I told him I want to go to university sometime. And then he caught me right away and he said, just wait a minute. So he went and got all the old people, my teachers. My Wiebe was in there too. Wiebe means my primary teacher. And it's a reciprocal relationship that we have. So they were all sitting outside the front of the band office on a nice green lawn. I thought, oh, I did something again. That I got into trouble again. Because anytime they were sitting together and talking about it, it was because I did something. So I thought, okay, I'm in trouble again. So anyway, I finally went out there, and then they told me, you can't go to those schools. You can't let Western education change the things you know about who you are as an Ojibwe person. We put you on this path, and you accept it. You must follow through. Anyway, I said, okay, fine. I wasn't in trouble. I still had a job. But I used to sneak into universities. I started in Brandon, just because I wanted to know, like, say, Brandon, I think I took archaeology, and then they caught me, threw me out. So I went over to Winnipeg, University of Winnipeg. I went there, and they caught me there, threw me out again. And then I went, well, there's one more. I'll go to University of Manitoba. So I went there too. That's my education. Western education. I learned to read on my own. My first language is Ojibwe. I barely spoke English when I went to kindergarten. But I started learning, and I realized at a very, very early age, I've got to understand this language. I have to try and understand these people that are coming here. That's what they're asking me to do. So that's what I've been doing for 64 years. I've been doing that kind of work. It's important that the history of Ojibwe people, of Indigenous people in this country, that their histories become part of Canadian history. That's what this treaty book is about. I've been trying to write that book for, it's a whole bunch of books. It got up to 10 chapters. And every time I sent it to an editor and they gave it back, I didn't understand who wrote this. I didn't understand how they tore it apart like that. So I would take it back, give it to somebody else, and they would do the same thing. Our stories don't seem to fit into the way Western academia works. It just doesn't work. So I sent it. I was affiliated with 29 universities in North America. So I sent them around. I said, could you guys help me? I need to get these stories out. I'm sick. I've got to make sure that these stories are told. And a young lady from a university that I went to in Tulsa, Oklahoma, sent me back a letter stating that the only way this story is going to be told is if you are inserted into the stories, and then you're telling what you're observing. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So I said, well, let's try it. Let's do a couple of chapters, and we'll see how it works. So she's writing it. I'm hoping that she's going to get done soon, so we can start writing the book. I got about, let's see, in the editing process there was 10 chapters, and in my house there's about 50 boxes. So they did a good job editing that, right? Yeah, so a lot of it, and this is just one little story that I just absent-mindedly told Will Braun the story about the Mennonite treaty. And then he said, oh, the what? I said, there was a treaty with us with the Mennonites. I just assumed everybody knew. And then he introduced me to Jonathan Dick. He's the illustrator of the comic book. And I said, well, let's try it this way, and I'll try it in our school, see how they react to the drawing. And then our kids just loved it. I said, okay, let's go for it. Let's make a final copy for this. So that's how we got to that secret treaty. The lands in this area was a very, very sacred place for our people. Very sacred. Remember, we were not the first ones here. The Crees brought us here under treaty because we had a large army to keep the Dakota back to the south of the Medicine Line. The Ojibwe, the Cree and the Ojibwe had a treaty. The Cree and the Assiniboine had a treaty. And they were to keep the Dakota people south of the Medicine Line. That's why we ended up here. And then as the Crees started following the buffalo herds west, then they kind of left the area open, so here we are today. And part of that treaty was about our first Indian RV, which was a teepee. You'd hook it up to your horse and take off with it, right? So that was our first RV. But it was far more practical, right? Plus they taught us how to live on this in this kind of land, because we are a woodland people. But we came out onto the open prairies under that treaty. So we had to learn everything, and the Crees taught us all of that. Taught us the significance of the teepee and how to live in open prairie, when to get out of the way of fires, those kinds of things. All of that was part of the treaty we had with the Cree people. It wasn't just to come over here and hunt Dakota people down. It wasn't that at all. It was mostly, there was a lot of psychological warfare amongst ourselves. There wasn't really any big major battles until the fur trade era came in. If somebody broke a nail and during a skirmish, everybody took off, spread, took right off. The last known fight between the Dakota and the Ojibwe was in the Souris Valley. The peace treaty between the Dakota and the Ojibwe people was held on the hill, on the North Hill by Ninette. You go up that hill towards Brandon, it's called where the two rattles stand. She Wanagapatakizawad is how we say that. That's where they made that peace treaty between the Ojibwe and the Dakota people. They said they wouldn't fight each other anymore. The Dakota people in this country, in this part of in this province, are considered refugees here. They came in, they were under the Canada's Citizenship Act. So they came here and they were called refugees. And in our treaty, that was their area over there on the west side of the province of Manitoba. That's what we agreed to, that they were getting slaughtered in the United States, so they came up here. So we told them, yeah, come on, there's lots of land here. You're welcome. So they came and they stayed on that side, but because they were originally, their main tribe was in the United States, Canada's government said that no, they have to be refugees here. There's a lot of reserves in this country that are created by the Indian Act. Even our reserve being created under treaty terms, we were forced into the Indian Act. The treaty terms were just totally, before the ink dried, the treaty was broken. These kinds of treaties and this kind of history had to be erased. It had to be erased in order for land transaction to continue. Once that was happening, once the treaty was signed, the allocation of Indian lands to non-indigenous people, non-Indian people, accelerated. They rushed to move people in here. John A. Macdonald did not like French Roman Catholics. He did not, because the Métis were part of the French Roman Catholic Church. So what he did was he flooded the area, this area in particular, with Church of England immigrants, and then immigrants such as the Mennonite communities, Ukrainians. And look at and if you look at this area here, there's very little French communities in our area, if you look at it. That's Canadian policy, because they didn't like French Roman Catholic people. That's what happened. The idea was that if we can bring in these people and they could start paying taxes to the government of Canada. That's why they did what they did. In my reserve, one of the things that that caused us a problem, or that freaked us out, I'll use that word, was why you farmers grew things in straight lines. It freaked us out. Because in our gardens, they became known as the Indians' gardens, was contouring and permaculture type of things. Myself, I still do that. I go around collecting beaver colonies from farmers that are flooding out their land. So I said, don't kill them, I'll come and get them. And I give them residence on the reserve. But I have to teach them. I teach them where I need my dams built, just by getting them started. They're very good about it. They free labor, I don't mind. You know, they build. So now I've got 9 dams in the one little valley that the reserve gave me responsibility for. And I bring a lot of non-Indigenous students out there to come and study with me about how to live with those creatures and how to live with all of the animals around there. Turtles is a big thing that I do. Why am I talking about this? It's because that's what was talked about in treaty time. The treaty that we made with the Mennonites. All of these things were discussed. At some point in time, after we chased the first Mennonites we seen here, after we chased them down and kind of held them to the ground and said, hey, come on, we're not that scary. Sit up here, we want to talk to you. Somehow they made language. Maybe somebody spoke English over there. We always used Métis people to translate for us all the time. Some of my, like Chirika, Uzaopen and them, it would be an insult for them to speak English. So somebody had to translate for them. And during that time, as long as we heard that language, the sounds of that language, then we knew we were in safe hands. The pacifist community that we learned about the Mennonites is that they wouldn't raise an army against us. So they're pretty good people. There isn't a single treaty made with British-speaking people other than the treaty one in our history. We didn't like British people. Sorry if anybody here is British. But we didn't at that time because of this dishonesty that we thought they were and that we seen them to be. So there is no secret treaties with British people. But we had treaties with the Métis people, we had treaties with the French people and the Mennonites, the Ukrainians, anybody that we can have alliances with. But as soon as the Indian Act came in, everything fell apart. All of those treaties stopped. All of that relationship building came to an end. And that's what the secret treaty is about. That we did take that first step together. We learned about each other. We shared things, we supported each other, right? And that freaky gardening you guys do in straight lines, we understand it now. But there's another story, the grid system, that 1 square mile story. There's a story of that in our oral history. These old men, and I remember the old people talking about this. They were sitting and they laugh about this all the time when they put in that square mile system. He says, look at what they're doing now. They're putting all those squares all over the places. They must have really lazy horses. That's the way they looked at it. You know, it just gives you a little insight into the way we think. It just didn't make sense to us that we didn't do things that we didn't not necessarily need. Our reserve destroyed a large area of our hunting and medicines, because they put the highways right through those areas. There's a highway, a municipal road, and 2 municipal roads and 2 reserve roads that cut right through that swamp where we used to collect duck eggs, plants, beaver, muskrats, all those things that we used to have in that slough area. You're never going to farm that land. It's going to flood every time. So that's what happened. They put in that grid system. Our people didn't measure time like June, July, August, or 1870 or 1871. We didn't measure time that way. We measured time against seasons, against a particular event, or the age of a storyteller. That's how we measured. Oh, that could have been this time, you know. So when they did catch the Mennonite at the Morden area on the Western Reserve, it was more towards Morden that they caught this guy. It was in the spring of 1875. Why do we know that? Because that would have been the year and the season would have been springtime that Kichinika would have had his ceremonies in this area here in the Altona area. He would have just been finishing his ceremonies and going back to where the sun dances were on the top of that escarpment. So that's how we figured out that it's approximately that time that we met the first Mennonite in this area. It was further that way. There's already the Steinbach area, which would have been the Medewin Society because it's rocky and swampy land over there. There's different types of land, right, as opposed to this open prairie. Kaganushko Deyang is what we call this. And up there on the escarpment is the Sundance and the Hunters and the different societies that are attached to that. In oral history storytelling, the age of the storyteller, the way I use, the standard I use is 4 people telling the same story in a general location. It must be 4, and you must know where that story comes from. If it says, if it's my great-grandfather, then you know, okay, my mom or my dad would have told me that, and it would have been handed down like that. That's the way it works. So to verify these stories, and again, that's Western thinking that these stories have to be verified, right? There was only one man in the Morden area that knew about this secret treaty, this treaty. Only one that ever mentioned it to me, and he told it to me around 1979, 1980, around that time I was in this area. I used to come around here all the time, visit the old people, try and get some stories. What were their interactions with us? Right? But there was only that one man, he says, no, that's something we don't talk about. Again, it was disgraceful for Christians to talk to devil worshippers. Or the devils even, they called us that too. So that was part of that Canadians' policy on Indians in this country that forced that onto us. When the Ojibwe learned that the Mennonites were pacifists and that they wouldn't raise an army against us, we started talking about skill transfer. We needed to know how these things were. And we needed to know it from people that we could trust and that were definitely not British speakers. That we did not want. So once we did that, we went around all over the place with people that didn't speak British, the British sounds. That's why we did that. There was an Ojibwe council held in the area of what is now known as Dead Horse Creek. That would have been around 1817. In 1818, the 49th parallel became the U.S.-Canada border. So these people of that time, and Ojibwe councils were in the hundreds. It wasn't just five people discussing an issue. It was everybody that had a responsibility for a community, they had a discussion about it. So the story that came out of that council was, why are they drawing lines on the ground that we cannot see? It is only the person that draws those lines that knows where they are. Surveyors, I guess, as we would call those now. Our people understood those lines as these things will imprison us, and it will imprison them when they keep drawing these lines on the ground. It will imprison them as it will imprison us. That's what came out of the 1817 council at Dead Horse Creek in this area. Getting back to the question of how is my time, by the way? Am I over?
If you could finish in, say, 5 minutes, that would be good, and then we'll maybe have a couple questions.
I forgot to ask about how much time I had this morning. Hey, look, if you can eat for half an hour, you can listen to me for 15 more. Okay, getting back to, let's do this really quick. In getting back to the question of how do we coexist, in my early years when I didn't know, I better not say that, from my elbow, I asked myself, how do I make my Ojibwe knowledge relevant? And how do I fit my knowledge into the Western thinking model, the description of the book? How does indigenous knowledge, what does indigenous knowledge consist of? Well, to me it's about my relationship with people, my interactions with the environment and all living things, as well as my spirituality. It is this understanding that helps me survive and for me to identify my place in the world. I had a recent scare with cancer. For the past several years, on and off my deathbed, 3 things come to mind: my spirituality, Western medicine, and the medicines of my ancestors. Not one over the other. It is this that has caused us to separate, because one thinks they are superior than the other. When this understanding is measured against Western scientific model, we are viewed as primitive, as living in a mythological world under some form of magic. The dismissal of our knowledge is based on this principle. If something cannot be tested, retested, and precisely measured, it is declared invalid and not of value to Western societies. Oral history and traditional knowledge under this perspective cannot be measured in this way and is therefore disregarded. I have talked to you today about the many problems I have faced to get the historical information of my people to the general public. I understand why they have not been told. I understand why they have gotten to the point we are today. There is still shame out there to engage in conversation with my people. There is still a lot of work to be done to get to a point where we can actually work with each other beyond the embarrassment and the fears we have of one another. If I am to leave you with one message today, it is this: we are human beings. We have passions, we have fears, we have feelings, but most of all we have heart. And we do care about the people who have come here from places beyond our understanding. We have welcomed you and we have supported you. We ask to be treated in the same way. The secret treaty must be told. The story must be widespread. Think of this story, the secret treaty. That's it. Okay, can I eat again? Talking makes me hungry. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me. That recent conference we had over there on Mennonite history, it's in there. They're going to transcribe it. So you can take it off of that, okay? I need this one because I only have one copy. Yes?
May I say something about that? I heard all this the other day on YouTube.
Yes, it's on YouTube.
You can all get a hold of it on YouTube.
Yeah.
David Scott,
This is also being recorded.
Oh, yeah.
I do have one copy of the secret treaty in my office, and we will try and get a hold of a few more for the church library and to circulate.
I apologize, I forgot them this morning. I have a whole bunch I was supposed to bring here. I'm not a book salesman, so let them guys deal with that. I'm not going to go around carrying books.
Okay, is there a question?
What here? I think
Yes,
so, yeah.
but let's not talk so much about the logistics of getting books. Is there questions related to what David shared?
Yes.
You mentioned the Indian Act, and just enough to know that it didn't serve us very well. Obviously, you not at all. To what point is that one being dealt with and amended and understood better?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's usually very hard to separate politics and law when you talk about Indian history. And I use the word Indian, and I use the word Indian Reserve because legally in this country that's who we are. We can all use the fancy words like First Nation and all of those glorious little political words. The Indian Act, that can be gotten rid of. It's been proven to be misogynistic against women. It's just a horribly racist document. And yet it still exists today. Why? Because there's Indians in this country, that their existence in this country is based on the Indian Act. Those that have not been dealt with under treaty. So the Indian Act exists today. It can be changed. But right now, with all of these new things coming online, the land back is another one, the issue they're coming, UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The thing about acts, when we kicked the Department of Indian Affairs off of our reserve in 1995, we told them, no, you're not going to look after our land anymore, we're going to do it, we're going to take control of it. They created another act. And in order for us to get any funding from the Canadian government, we had to step into that other act. So a full 1/3 of the Indian Act does not apply on our reserve. It's the same thing, but it's under a different act. So they do that to us. An Indian could not be a human being. I'll tell you how strong the Indian was back in the day. There was a lady from Somerset that poisoned 4 of our people, killed them, was selling wood alcohol. Killed those 4 people. She could not be charged for killing those 4 Indians. What she did get charged with was selling alcohol to an Indian. That's what she got charged for instead of killing those 4. Remember, we were not human beings under Canadian law, British common law of the day. That's how powerful that Indian Act was. And it could be interpreted. Those old drunk British people that came to the reserve that called themselves Indian agents, they became magistrates after. They became magistrates in this country, those people. We didn't have access to the Canadian court system at all. We didn't. No lawyer can act on our behalf. And because we were not human beings, we couldn't go to court. Any other questions? Yes, the one here.
You spoke of how you are the only one who speaks your language. So my question is, are there young people that experience what you did when you had the circle of your educators telling you that you were going to be carrying their knowledge? Are there more people that can do that?
There used to be, yeah. There used to be, but because of Western influence, just like your own kids, social media and all that other stuff, they don't take it seriously anymore. They don't take it seriously. Our spirituality is at a dying point, where there's not very much of us left. There's a lot that is being created out there. Those are those false, well, maybe I shouldn't say false. They must understand something. But I get this question all the time from teachers. How are we supposed to know what we're doing? How do we know? The first thing I always tell them is, make sure they're not bringing spirituality into the school. My spirituality is an extremely personal and private thing. Like that protocol of giving me tobacco, I told him, no, I don't do that. If you're giving me tobacco, you're asking me to be spiritual. That's the meaning of that. So there's a lot of people running around out there that are selling their spirituality and shoving it down your throats. And they're doing it in your schools as well. I'm working with 5 school divisions in this area now, where we're going to try and write up something that they can help them, because they don't know. I tell them, watch out for those guys, Indian guys wearing cowboy hats with feathers in them, wearing a ribbon shirt and smudging everything in sight. Those are the performers. That shouldn't happen. Our people should know better. We didn't like it when it happened to us. We shouldn't be doing that now. And I'm dealing with the kids in the schools now because of somebody that come in and done something like that. So I'm working with a lot of school divisions on trying to get a better system in place. Sadly, I don't know how to say it, our academics, indigenous academics, like even the language, some Indians went to university in Winnipeg and they got a degree in linguistics. So now they come out to the reserve. No, you don't know how to teach your language. We do. I have the paper. I have the degree. Do it this way. And it's really, really complicated the way. Our language is not a written language. And in our stories and in those books that you see and read, spirituality is so tied into that. And that shouldn't be out there. Not if you really, really believe in your spirituality. They know that place is not open to public. We are not evangelical people. We don't do that. I don't run around with my pipe in hand asking them, here, use my pipe, and it's going to cost you $500. Because that's what's happening right now. And it is a mess out there. And it's people like me that have to go run around and hopefully get it straightened out. So yeah. It's very, very difficult. But we're making a major push on truth and reconciliation. My adopted son Finn was going to be here today, but he decided he wanted to go hiking instead of coming with me. He has a story to tell about his experience and how he come to live with the Ojibwe people in my reserve. And we adopted him, traditional adoption, through our community. So he's got a story to tell. That's truth in action. His life story is truth in action. Any other questions? Going once, going twice? Feel like anything else?
I'm going to just count to 5.
Okay.
And we'll see if anyone asks a question.
See how quickly I can go out the door? I want to
Margaret has a question, yeah.
Nowadays, you hear many land acknowledgements. How do you feel about land acknowledgements?
Ooh, you snuck up on that one, eh? For me, I don't let my grandchildren do that. To me, that's colonialism, if you think about it. I don't do land acknowledgement. It's a colonialistic thinking of who we are as a people. It gives me responsibility I do not have. So that's why I don't allow my kids to do land acknowledgement. I was at a school in Morden, the grade 6 kids wanted me to look at their land acknowledgement papers. I said, oh great, I'll help you guys. And they did, you know, we are on treaty, one land, blah, 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 blah. And then they started saying, and I'm sorry for residential school, and I'm sorry for, and I'm sorry for, and I'm sorry for. I said, no, not that. You kids have nothing to be sorry for. It's the adults in the room that have to do something to get our lives straightened out and back on the right path. So I make sure kids don't do that. But see, that's where problems come in. As soon as you start thinking that we're superior to anybody else, just because we were here first. No, we weren't here first. Doesn't matter who was here first, we're here now. You're all here too. So I don't like that because it's colonialism. And I understand why it's being done. I understand the calls to action. I read every one of them. But that, to me, is colonialism. And I don't like it. But if you guys are going to do it, go ahead. It's up to you guys.
But is the land acknowledgement helpful? Can it not be helpful for me or for us as people who have benefited from colonialism? Is it not an act of undoing colonialism?
No, because you're not dealing with what you're giving me as an Ojibwe person. And I'm the spiritual leader of my community and an elder in our community. If you do that, that's fine if you do it for your own purposes. But to think that recognizing that there was other people here before you, fine, go ahead, do it, right? But don't give me that responsibility. It's not my land. I can't own land. I have to live in the land. I don't make nature subservient to me. I have to live with it. And I said in my talk here about how does my knowledge fit into Western thinking, right? I can't be superior to anybody else. And I don't want those kinds of things to happen. Well, if you ask me, it hurts our kids and it hurts yours to make them feel like they don't belong here. So if you're going to do it, make sure you tell them that they have just as much right to be here as anybody else. That's the way I look at it. I've taken this step in my early life to always work with people that are here with me. Even the ones that hate me, I still go and talk to them. But that, to me, if you guys want to do it, but work it so you understand that it's not superior to anything else. If you want to be forgiven or whatever it is that you're trying to do in your own lives, then do it. Do it. Don't waste your time on the semantics of government's policies. I wrote a paper on Canada's history policies. It's a stark reminder as to why our people are the way they are today. So I caution you on land acknowledgement. Do it in such a way that it doesn't make people feel bad. Okay? I want to thank you for that question. I don't let my kids do it.
So you mentioned tobacco protocol.
Yeah.
I have a different protocol. It's a Mennonite protocol. This is a prayer shawl.
Okay.
It was knit by somebody from our church community. We have a tradition, a great tradition of knitting and crocheting in the Mennonite community. And this is part of that. And for us, the prayer shawl is it represents God's embrace and the Creator's welcome of us. And so on behalf of our church community, we'd like to send you with this prayer shawl as a sign of our relationship. And may you and the people of Swan Lake remember us as we remember you.
Thank you very much. I like that. This is my second one, by the way. Thank you. I like that. Thank you all for listening to me today.
Thank you, David.
All righty.
As we're going to sing one more song to send us on our way here.
Song together. We sang it last Sunday, but speaks well to the things that we've heard today. sing with you, my family. Sing with me. I will sing with you, my family. Sing with me. The notes won't always come out as I like, but I will learn to see the Lord in my own life. Bring us together, bring us together. We'll sing with you, my neighbor, you sing with me. I will sing with you, my neighbor, you sing with me. The word will be imperfect, but I'll try. Bringing my assumptions to the light, I'll pray, I'll surrender. Bring us together, bring us together. We'll sing with you.